My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 62 years old, and it took me exactly 40 seconds to dismantle the toxic family empire I had spent 40 years paying for. They say blood is thicker than water, but in my family, blood was just a down payment. I was the silent ATM, the checkbook that never bounced, the dutiful daughter who bought peace at the cost of my own sanity. Until the night my 84-year-old mother publicly humiliated me in front of 200 people just because I finally refused to write a $500,000 check to my deadbeat brother. That was her first mistake. Her second was thinking I'd just roll over and take it. This isn't just a story about family betrayal, it's a blueprint for taking your life back. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end, because the truth is stranger and far more satisfying than fiction. The view from my corner office in Buckhead offered a sweeping panorama of the Atlanta skyline, a concrete and glass testament to building something out of nothing. I had spent the last 3 decades clawing my way up in the cutthroat world of commercial real estate. I built Vance Brokerage from a cramped, windowless room with a leaky roof into a multi-million-dollar firm. I was respected. I was formidable. I was a self-made woman. But the moment my cell phone rang and the caller ID flashed Mom, I wasn't a CEO anymore. I was just the family's deep pocket. I let it ring 3 times before I took a slow, deep breath and picked it up. Hello, Mother. Eleanor, darling. Finally, Beatrice Sterling's voice trilled through the speaker. Even at 84, my mother sounded like a Southern belle who was perpetually annoyed that the world wasn't rolling out a red carpet for her. I've been trying to reach you all morning. The florist for the country club is trying to nickel and dime us. He says the imported white Phalaenopsis orchids are going to run an extra $2,000. I told him my daughter is footing the bill, so he shouldn't be so stingy. I rubbed my temples, feeling the familiar onset of a migraine. The Thanksgiving weekend was doubling as her 84th birthday bash at the Piedmont Country Club. The tab was already pushing $45,000, all quietly paid from my personal account. Mom, we already agreed on the floral budget, I said, trying to keep my tone even. $45,000 is a lot of money for a single evening. The standard orchids are fine. Beatrice let out a sharp, dramatic sigh. Eleanor, please don't be tacky. This is a milestone birthday. All my friends from the garden club will be there. Arthur is flying in and he's bringing some heavy hitters from his new tech venture. We can't look like we're cutting corners. We need to project success. You know how important optics are for your brother. Yes. Arthur. My younger brother, Arthur Sterling, was 58 years old and still waiting for his life to start. He was the golden child, the undisputed prince of the Sterling family. While I had spent my 20s working 80-hour weeks and eating instant ramen, Arthur was finding himself backpacking through Europe, funded by my mother, who, in turn, was funded by me. Over the decades, Arthur had transitioned from a struggling artist to a crypto bro, then an NFT guru, and now, apparently, a tech visionary. Every single one of his surefire startups was a pipe dream that ended in bankruptcy. And every single time, I was the one expected to bail him out so Mother wouldn't have a nervous breakdown. Arthur's new venture, I repeated flatly. You mean the app that's supposed to revolutionize dog walking? Mom, he's blowing smoke. He's been riding my coattails for 30 years. Don't speak about your brother that way, Beatrice snapped, her southern charm instantly evaporating into pure ice. Arthur has the vision. He just hasn't caught his big break yet. He doesn't have your ruthless streak when it comes to money. He's an artist at heart. Anyway, I already told the florist to upgrade the centerpieces. Just wire the extra $2,000 to my black card, would you, sweetie? I have a fitting for my gown in an hour. Ciao. The line went dead before I could argue. She knew I wouldn't call back to fight. I never did. For 40 years, my survival strategy in this family had been to throw money at the problem until it went away. It was a coward's way out, maybe, but it bought me silence. The heavy oak door of my office swung open and Evelyn Hayes marched in. Evelyn, 61, was my wealth manager, my fiercely loyal best friend, and the only person on earth who terrified my mother. Dressed in a sharp navy pantsuit, holding a stack of financial printouts, Evelyn looked like a woman ready to go to war. Tell me you didn't just authorize another charge for that circus this weekend, Evelyn said, dropping the manila folder onto my mahogany desk with a loud thud. It's just $2,000 for orchids, Evie, I muttered, avoiding her sharp gaze. It's to keep the peace. Keep the peace? Evelyn scoffed, crossing her arms. Elle, you're not keeping the peace. You're funding a hostage situation, and you're the hostage. She flipped open the folder. I was doing a routine audit of your secondary accounts this morning, the ones you set up for Beatrice's medical emergencies and living expenses. My stomach tightened. Did she overdraw again? Overdraw? Honey, she's bleeding you dry, Evelyn said, tapping a perfectly manicured fingernail against the spreadsheet. In the last 6 months alone, you've sunk over $80,000 into her lifestyle. And that's not including this ridiculous $45,000 Great Gatsby knockoff party you're throwing her this weekend. Your brother is a freeloader, and your mother is his enabler. When are you going to cut the cord? It's not that simple, I whispered, staring out the window at the bustling city below. She's my mother. She's 84. If I cut her off, she'll guilt trip me into the grave. You know how she gets. She plays the victim so well she deserves an Oscar. Evelyn softened slightly, walking around the desk to put a hand on my shoulder. I know, Elle. I know she uses your guilt against you, but you work too damn hard for this empire to let a deadbeat brother and a narcissistic mother use you like a limitless credit line. Just keep your eyes open this weekend. Arthur never flies into town just to eat turkey and sing happy birthday. He's broke. Again. He's going to ask for a handout. I can feel it in my bones. I won't give him a dime this time, I promised, though even to my own ears the words sounded hollow. I draw the line at the party. Evelyn gave me a look that said she'd heard that lie 100 times before. Just remember who holds the cards, Eleanor. You hold the purse strings. You have the power. Stop letting them treat you like the hired help. 2 days later, the Friday after Thanksgiving, the Piedmont Country Club was bathed in the warm, golden glow of crystal chandeliers. A string quartet played softly in the corner. The room was packed with 200 of Atlanta's most elite socialites, politicians, and business moguls. I stood near the open bar, nursing a club soda with lime, wearing a sleek black Carolina Herrera gown. I had paid for every drop of champagne flowing from the towering fountain, every imported Wagyu slider being passed around on silver trays, and yes, every single one of those absurdly expensive white orchids gracing the tables. Yet, I felt entirely invisible. The doors swung open, and the guest of honor finally made her grand entrance. Beatrice Sterling swept into the ballroom wearing a custom emerald green gown that cost more than a reliable used car. She was heavily contoured, dripping in diamonds, and beaming like royalty holding court. Beside her, playing the role of the devoted escort, was Arthur. Arthur wore a tailored Tom Ford tuxedo that I knew for a fact he couldn't afford. His hair was slicked back, and he had that signature smarmy $1,000,000 smile plastered across his face. He looked like a guy trying to sell you a timeshare in a swamp. As they worked the room, greeting the heavy hitters, I watched the dynamic play out exactly as it had my entire life. Beatrice introduced Arthur with glowing pride. This is my son, Arthur. He's a tech entrepreneur. Brilliant mind. About to launch a major platform. And when she finally navigated her way over to where I was standing, her smile tightened. Eleanor, your hair is a bit severe, don't you think? And black? Really? It's a birthday party, not a funeral. Hello, Mom. Happy birthday, I said, ignoring the jab. The room looks beautiful. Arthur slapped me on the shoulder a little too hard. Hey, sis, swanky joint. You really went all out for the old lady. Drinks are on the house, right? I'm footing the bill, Arthur, so yes, the drinks are paid for, I replied coolly. He didn't even have the grace to look embarrassed. He just chuckled, a slick practice sound. Good to know. Listen, Elle, I'm glad we're all together tonight. I've got some big players here from Silicon Valley. We're in the seed funding stage for my new app. It's going to be a unicorn, I swear. Total market disruption. I was hoping maybe we could sit down on Monday, talk about you coming in as an angel investor. Just a little seed money to get the servers running. Here it is, I thought. Evelyn was right. It never took him long to get to the grift. Arthur, I told you the last time your crypto exchange tanked. I'm no longer funding your startups, I said, keeping my voice low so the nearby guests wouldn't hear. I am a real estate broker, not a venture capitalist. The Bank of Eleanor is closed. And Arthur's smug smile faltered for a fraction of a second, his eyes flashing with a sudden, ugly resentment. But before he could argue, Beatrice stepped between us, placing a manicured hand on Arthur's chest defensively. Eleanor, stop being so dramatic, Beatrice hissed, her eyes darting around to make sure no one was watching us. Your brother is on the verge of something massive. Family supports family. We will discuss this later. I am going to make my speech now, and I expect you to look supportive. do not ruin my night." She turned on her heel and glided toward the grand stage set up at the head of the ballroom. Arthur shot me a sly, victorious wink before following her. He knew Mother would always fight his battles. He knew Mother always wore me down. I watched them step up to the microphone, listening to the clinking of a spoon against a champagne flute as Beatrice called for the room's attention. I didn't know it yet, but the speech she was about to give wouldn't just ruin her night. It was going to end our relationship forever. The match was struck, the powder keg was set, and all I had to do was stand there and wait for the explosion. The Piedmont Country Club ballroom was a sea of glittering jewels, clinking crystal, and the soft hum of old money. 200 of Atlanta's most influential people were gathered under the chandeliers, all eating the $50 filet mignon I had paid for. But as my mother, Beatrice, tapped her spoon against her champagne flute, a heavy, suffocating dread settled in my stomach. Evelyn, my wealth manager, had magically appeared at my elbow. She handed me a fresh club soda with a lime twist. "Brace yourself, Elle," she murmured, her eyes narrowed at the stage. "I know that look on your mother's face. She's about to drop a bombshell." "It's just a birthday speech, Evie," I whispered back, though my heart was beginning to hammer against my ribs. "She's just going to thank everyone for coming and brag about her garden club." "Bull," Evelyn muttered. "Look at Arthur. He looks like the cat that ate the canary." I glanced at my brother. Arthur was standing just behind our mother on the raised mahogany stage, his hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the crowd with a sickeningly smug expression. "Friends, family, esteemed guests," Beatrice began, her voice echoing through the state-of-the-art sound system. Her southern drawl was dialed up to 11, thick as molasses and entirely calculated. "I am so incredibly moved to see all of your beautiful faces here tonight. 84 years is a long time to walk this earth, and I am just so blessed to share it with my wonderful children." She paused, pressing a perfectly manicured hand to her chest, right over her diamond tennis necklace. The crowd let out a collective, sympathetic awe. She was playing them like a grand piano. "As a widowed mother, my greatest joy has been watching my children succeed," Beatrice continued, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "Now, we all know my daughter Eleanor has done fine for herself in real estate." Fine. I bit the inside of my cheek. I had built a $50 million commercial brokerage from scratch, but to Beatrice, it was always just fine. "But tonight," Beatrice's voice suddenly swelled with booming pride, "tonight is about the future. And the future belongs to my son, Arthur." A polite smattering of applause rippled through the room. I felt the muscles in my neck tighten. Here we go. The pitch. "Arthur has always been the visionary of this family," Beatrice announced, beaming at him. "He's an innovator, a pioneer, and he is on the absolute bleeding edge of the tech industry. His new venture is going to disrupt the market. It's going to change the way we live. He's got the brains, he's got the drive, and he has the support of some major players from Silicon Valley in the room with us tonight." She gestured dramatically to a table near the front where 3 men in expensive casual tech suits raised their glasses. They were the heavy hitters Arthur had mentioned. To me, they looked like sharks circling a very leaky boat. "But, you see," Beatrice said, lowering her voice into a conspiratorial, intimate register that carried perfectly across the silent room, "a family is only as strong as its foundation. And we Sterlings, we stick together. We put our money where our mouth is." My blood ran cold. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Evelyn grabbed my forearm, her grip like a vice. "Mother, no," I breathed out, stepping back into the shadows of the bar, desperately hoping to vanish. "Which is why," Beatrice declared, her eyes scanning the crowd until they locked onto me with laser precision, "as a testament to our unbreakable family bond, and as my ultimate birthday wish, my daughter Eleanor is going to become the lead angel investor in Arthur's new company tonight." The spotlight, the literal glaring white spotlight controlled by the AV guy I had hired, swung across the room and hit me dead in the face. I was a deer in the headlights, frozen under the gaze of 200 people. "Come on up here, darling," Beatrice cooed into the microphone, waving me over. "Eleanor has generously agreed to pledge $500,000 in seed money to Arthur's venture right here, right now, to get the ball rolling." The ballroom erupted into applause and enthusiastic cheers. The Silicon Valley guys were clapping loudly. The mayor of Atlanta, sitting at table 4, gave me an approving nod. It was a masterclass in emotional blackmail. It was an ambush. She had set a trap in front of the most powerful people in the city, knowing full well that for 40 years, my greatest fear had been causing a public scene. She was banking on my lifelong habit of folding under pressure to save face. She expected me to walk up to that stage, smile for the cameras, and sign away $500,000 for Arthur's latest snake oil scam, just to avoid embarrassing her. "Don't you dare," Evelyn hissed in my ear, her voice fierce. "If you walk up there and say, yes, I am resigning on Monday. Call her bluff, Eleanor." For a split second, the old Eleanor, the terrified, eager-to-please daughter who just wanted her mother to love her, almost took over. My legs felt heavy. My chest was tight. $500,000. It was a staggering amount of money, even for me. But it wasn't just the money, it was the principle. It was the sheer, breathtaking audacity of the disrespect. I looked at Arthur. He wasn't even hiding it anymore. He was grinning at me, a victorious, entitled smirk that said, "I own you. We own you." And just like that, the 40 years of guilt, the decades of conditioning, the endless nights of writing checks to cover their messes, it all just evaporated. The fog cleared. I wasn't the scared little girl anymore. I was the CEO of Vance Brokerage. I handed my club soda to the bartender. I smoothed down the front of my Carolina Herrera gown, pulled my shoulders back, and walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for me, offering pats on the back and murmurs of how generous and what a good sister. I kept my face entirely neutral, a mask of carved ice. I climbed the 4 carpeted steps onto the stage. Beatrice was holding out the microphone to me, her eyes flashing with a silent, vicious warning, "Play your part." I stepped up to the podium, ignoring the microphone she offered, and leaned into the main mic mounted on the stand. I looked out over the sea of faces, then turned my head to look directly at my mother and my brother. The ballroom was dead silent, waiting for my heartwarming speech. "No," I said. Just one word, quiet, firm, and echoing like a gunshot through the state-of-the-art speakers. The smiles in the front row faltered. Beatrice's hand, still holding out the spare mic, froze in mid-air. "I'm sorry, folks. I think there's been a misunderstanding," I continued, my voice steady, betraying none of the adrenaline flooding my veins. "I love my mother, and I was happy to pay for this beautiful party tonight, but I am not an angel investor, and I will certainly not fund another one of my brother's delusions. The Bank of Eleanor is permanently closed. Enjoy your filet mignon, everyone." A collective gasp sucked the oxygen right out of the room. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. Arthur's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "Eleanor, what the hell are you doing?" he hissed, stepping forward, his panic bleeding through his custom tuxedo. "You're embarrassing us in front of the investors." "I'm not embarrassing anyone, Arthur," I said coldly, stepping away from the podium. "You do a perfectly fine job of that yourself." I turned to walk down the stairs. I almost made it. I didn't see Beatrice move. For an 84-year-old woman fueled by narcissistic rage, she was shockingly fast. Before I reached the first step, she grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. Her face was contorted, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the sheer venom in her eyes. Crack! The sound of her open palm connecting with my left cheek echoed through the silent ballroom like a whip. My head snapped to the side. The sting was immediate and blinding, a hot flare of pain blooming across my skin. For a second, the chandeliers blurred into a streak of bright light. I tasted the metallic tang of copper where my teeth had clipped the inside of my cheek. Someone in the crowd let out a horrified shriek. The string quartet, who had been softly tuning their instruments, knocked over a music stand in shock. "You are a shame!" Beatrice screamed, her voice cracking, completely unhinged, her Southern Belle facade shattered into a million pieces. "You selfish, ungrateful bitch! After everything I've done for you, leave! Leave now!" I stood there for a long moment, my face burning. I didn't raise my hand to touch my cheek. I didn't cry. I didn't yell back. I just looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw a bitter, greedy old woman who loved my wallet but had never loved me. And in that moment of absolute horrifying public humiliation, I felt something I hadn't felt in 40 years. I felt completely, utterly free. I looked at Arthur, who was staring at me with wide, panicked eyes, realizing his cash cow had just been slaughtered on stage. Then I looked back at my mother. "Happy birthday, Mother," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but in the dead silence of the room, it carried perfectly. I turned my back on them and walked down the stairs. The crowd parted from me again, not with admiration this time, but with wide-eyed shock. I walked straight past Evelyn, who was staring at the stage with absolute murder in her eyes. "I'll meet you at the car, Evie," I said quietly as I passed her. I walked out of the ballroom, down the grand hallway, and out the heavy glass doors into the crisp November air without saying another word. The valet rushed to get my Mercedes. As I sat in the driver's seat, the engine purring, the left side of my face throbbing with a dull ache, my phone buzzed in my purse. It was an automated text message from my bank's fraud department. Alert. Suspicious charge of $150,000 attempted on your secondary platinum card ending in 4092 at the Bellagio Casino, Las Vegas. Reply, yes to authorize. I stared at the screen. Beatrice hadn't just ambushed me for Arthur's tech startup. While I was sipping club soda and paying for her orchids, Arthur had been trying to drain my credit line to cover his gambling debts across the country. A cold, dark smile spread across my face. I didn't reply to the text. I just put the car in drive and pulled out of the country club. They wanted a war, and they had absolutely no idea who they had just declared it on. Saturday morning arrived, wrapped in a shroud of gray Atlanta rain, drumming a steady, rhythmic beat against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse. For the first time in 40 years, I didn't wake up with the creeping, suffocating anxiety of wondering what crisis I would have to buy my family out of today. I stood in front of the marble vanity in my master bathroom, staring at my reflection. The left side of my face bore a faint, undeniable shadow, a blossoming, plum-colored bruise right along my cheekbone. It throbbed with a dull, persistent ache every time I swallowed. I didn't try to cover it with foundation. I didn't ice it. I wanted to look at it. That bruise was my receipt. It was the physical proof that the exorbitant price of admission I had paid to be part of the Sterling family was finally, officially, non-refundable. The security buzzer echoed through the quiet apartment. I tied my silk robe tighter and walked out to the foyer, pressing the intercom. "It's Evie," a voice crackled through the speaker. "I come bearing dark roast espresso, almond croissants, and a vengeance." "Come on up," I said, a faint smile touching my lips for the first time since the night before. Evelyn stepped off the private elevator looking less like a wealth manager and more like a tactical operative. She was dressed in black cashmere loungewear, her oversized designer sunglasses pushed up into her silver hair, and she was hauling a massive reinforced leather briefcase that I knew contained her encrypted work laptop. She handed me a steaming cup of coffee and marched straight past me toward the massive kitchen island. "Rise and shine, Buttercup," she announced, dropping the briefcase onto the granite counter with a heavy thud. "We have a financial homicide to investigate. I've been up since 4 a.m. I already called Julian over at the bank's private wealth division and got him out of bed. He's pulling the raw data now." I took a sip of the bitter, scalding espresso, letting it jolt my system awake. "You saw the text message I forwarded you last night?" Evelyn's eyes narrowed as she flipped open her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced speed. "The $150,000 attempted charge at the Bellagio. Yes, that's what triggered my insomnia. Let's break this down, Elle, because it's a masterclass in audacity." I pulled up a bar stool next to her. Arthur was standing right next to me at the Piedmont Country Club when that charge was attempted in Vegas. How is that even possible? "Because your brother is a degenerate, but he's not an idiot when it comes to covering his tracks," Evelyn said grimly, bringing up a complex spreadsheet filled with red and green columns. I had Julian trace the authorization code. It wasn't a physical card swipe. It was a phone authorization to a casino VIP host. She spun the laptop around so I could see the screen. "Arthur owes a massive casino marker. A marker is basically a short-term, zero-interest credit line the casino extends to high rollers. If you don't pay it back within 30 days, it becomes a criminal offense in the state of Nevada. They don't just send collections, they send the district attorney. Arthur's 30 days were up yesterday." I stared at the numbers, the reality clicking into place. The tech venture, the $500,000 seed money Mother tried to extort out of me on stage. "Exactly," Evelyn said, tapping the screen. "There is no tech venture, Eleanor. There are no Silicon Valley investors. Those 3 guys in the cheap suits at the party, probably low-level loan sharks or debt fixers he flew in to make the pitch look legitimate. When you publicly shut him down and walked out, Arthur panicked. He slipped into the bathroom, called his host at the Bellagio, and tried to pay off the most urgent chunk of the debt using the emergency platinum card." "The card I gave Mother 5 years ago," I said, my voice eerily calm. "The one specifically designated for her heart medication, her in-home nursing care, and her property taxes." "Bingo," Evelyn said, leaning back and crossing her arms. Beatrice handed over that card to him. She knew exactly what he was doing. She knew he was drowning in gambling debt, and she tried to use you as the life raft. When the ambush failed, they tried to just steal it directly from your credit line. A profound, icy clarity washed over me. The years of guilt, the endless self-doubt, the late nights wondering if I was just being a cold, unfeeling daughter, it all evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hard businesswoman. My personality had always been rooted in compliance and steadiness. I played by the rules, built my empire methodically, and expected others to do the same. I had treated my family with the same steady loyalty, but they had treated me like a mark. They played me, I whispered. It wasn't a question. They played you like a cheap fiddle, Evelyn agreed softly, her tone devoid of its usual sarcasm. But that's not even the worst of it, Elle. Once Julian pulled the Bellagio authorization, I told him to run a full forensic diagnostic on the medical and living account for the past 36 months. I wanted to see every single penny Beatrice has spent. Evelyn pulled the laptop back and opened a new tab. This one was entirely red. You've been auto-transferring $8,000 on the first of every month into that account, Evelyn explained, scrolling down the endless list of transactions. Supposedly, for her premium arthritis treatments, the private chef to manage her diet, and the weekly housekeeper. Look at the vendor names. I leaned in, my eyes scanning the screen. Transfer. Apex Trading, LC, $2,500. Transfer. Apex Trading LLC, $3,000. Point of sale. The Grand Venetian Resort and Casino, $1,200. Transfer. Apex Trading LLC, $4,000. What is Apex Trading LLC? I asked, though a sickening intuition was already twisting in my gut. It's a shell company, Evelyn said, her voice dripping with disgust. Registered in Delaware. I ran the incorporation documents through my contacts. The managing director is Arthur Sterling. Your mother hasn't been paying a private chef or buying imported arthritis medication. For 3 years, she has been funneling roughly 70% of your monthly care allowance directly into Arthur's offshore day trading and crypto accounts. He loses it, she sends more. And I sat back, the air suddenly feeling very thin in the massive kitchen. 3 years. While I was working 14-hour days, agonizing over commercial lease agreements, negotiating with contractors, and building a legacy, my mother was systematically laundering my money to feed my brother's addictions. She hadn't just slapped my face. She had been spitting in it for years. Are you okay? Evelyn asked gently, watching the myriad of emotions flash across my face. I'm fine, I said. And to my own surprise, I meant it. The anger wasn't hot and explosive like Beatrice's, it was cold, it was surgical. I want to shut it down, all of it. I have Julian on standby, Evelyn said, sliding her phone across the island toward me. Give the word, and every secondary card attached to your master accounts will be frozen instantly. They won't be able to buy a pack of gum. I looked at the phone. My finger hovered over the screen. It would be so easy to just cut the cord right now. To let them wake up and find their endless well of cash had run completely dry. But a sudden, strategic thought paused my hand. If I just cut up the credit cards, Beatrice would immediately launch a smear campaign. She would call every aunt, uncle, and country club socialite in Atlanta, weeping about how her cruel, heartless daughter had abandoned her. She would spin it. She would play the victim. And Arthur? Arthur was a rat cornered by dangerous people. If his credit cards were declined, he would scramble. He would look for other assets to liquidate. No, I said, pulling my hand back. Evelyn blinked, clearly stunned. No? Eleanor, did you not just hear a word I said? They are robbing you blind. I heard you, Evie, I said, standing up and walking over to the espresso machine to pour myself another shot. But if I freeze the accounts now, they'll know we're on to them. They'll panic and try to hide whatever else they've been doing. And trust me, if they're bold enough to try and wire $150,000 to a casino, this isn't the bottom of the barrel. I turned around, leaning against the counter, meeting Evelyn's shocked gaze. I don't just want to stop the bleeding, I told her, my voice dropping an octave, solid and unyielding. I want to dismantle the entire operation. I want to know exactly what else they have touched, what else they have compromised. I want every single receipt. Evelyn's shock slowly morphed into a slow, predatory grin. She closed the laptop with a sharp snap. Now you're talking like the CEO I know. So, What's the play? Leave the accounts active for now, but have Julian put a silent, hard cap on them, I instructed. Set the daily limit to exactly $100. If they try to buy groceries or gas, it goes through. If they try to buy a Gucci bag or wire money to Vegas, it declines. Let them think it's a temporary bank error. Keep them comfortable, but keep them grounded. Done, Evelyn said, already typing out the text to her banker. And while they're distracted fighting with customer service, what do? We dig deeper, I said, looking out at the rain-soaked city skyline. Arthur is desperate. Beatrice is arrogant. Arrogant people leave paper trails. I want you to pull the deeds to my properties. Check the titles. Check the insurance policies. Check anything my mother has ever had her name attached to, no matter how briefly. I touched the bruise on my cheek lightly, feeling the sting. Because if she's willing to hit me in public, I murmured, more to myself than to Evelyn, there is absolutely no telling what she has done to me in private. Monday morning at Vance Brokerage began exactly the same way it had for the last 20 years. The aroma of freshly brewed Colombian coffee permeated the sleek, glass-walled corridors. Telephones hummed with the quiet, steady rhythm of commerce. I sat at my mahogany desk wearing a tailored charcoal blazer, meticulously reviewing a 50-page commercial lease agreement for a new high-rise in Midtown. I have always been a woman of process. I thrive on structure, on strict compliance with the rules, and on the steady, predictable rhythm of a well-executed plan. I don't do impulsive. I don't do erratic emotional outbursts. When a crisis hits, my instinct isn't to scream. It's to gather the data, analyze the variables, and execute a solution. But as I highlighted a discrepancy in Clause 4B of the lease, my mind was running a very different kind of audit. It had been 48 hours since I put the silent $100 daily limit on Beatrice and Arthur's secondary cards. My phone had been ringing off the hook all morning. 6 missed calls from Mother, 4 from Arthur. I hadn't answered a single one. Let them sit in the dark and sweat. Let them blame the bank. I needed time, and more importantly, I needed facts. At exactly 10:15 a.m., the heavy oak door to my office clicked open. Evelyn walked in. For the first time in the 3 decades I had known her, my fiercely unflappable wealth manager looked physically ill. Her usually immaculate posture was rigid, and all the color had drained from her face. She closed the door behind her, turned the deadbolt with a sharp clack, and pulled the blinds shut on the glass walls facing the bullpen. Evie? I set my pen down, the hairs on my arm standing up. What is it? Did Arthur try to skip town? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She walked over to my desk, her breathing shallow, and dropped a thick manila legal folder onto the center of my blotter. The label on the tab read, Lake Lanier Property, Title and Deed. I did what you asked, Evelyn said, her voice unusually tight, almost a whisper. I had Julian pull the deeds and run a full title search on all your real estate holdings. Your primary residence in Buckhead is clear. The commercial properties under the LLC are clear. She pointed a trembling finger at the folder. But your vacation home, the lake house on Lanier. My stomach plummeted. The Lake Lanier property wasn't just an asset, it was my sanctuary. It was a sprawling, custom-built cabin nestled on 3 acres of private shoreline. I had bought it in cash 10 years ago with the intention of retiring there. It was the only place in the world where I could truly breathe. What about it? I asked, keeping my voice dangerously level. Open it, she said, pulling out one of the leather guest chairs and sinking into it. I flipped open the folder. Sitting on top of the stack of papers was a bank document, a loan agreement. My eyes scanned the bold black header, and the breath was instantly knocked out of my lungs. Home equity line of credit. HELOC. Authorized amount, $400,000. I stared at the number until it blurred. $400,000. Borrowed against the equity of my fully paid-off sanctuary. This is a mistake, I said, my voice sounding hollow, like it was coming from someone else. I own that property free and clear. I never took out a line of credit. I haven't signed a loan document for a personal property in 15 years. Look at the signature page, Eleanor, Evelyn instructed softly. I flipped to the back. There, on the dotted line, was a signature. It wasn't mine. It wasn't even a good forgery. Beneath the signature, stamped in official blue ink, was a notary seal and a block of text that made the room spin, signed by Beatrice Sterling, acting as attorney-in-fact for Eleanor Vance, under durable power of attorney. A power of attorney? I gasped, looking up at Evelyn. How? I never gave her financial control of my life. The only time I ever signed a POA was... I stopped. The memory hit me like a physical blow. October 2023, 2 years ago. I had been rushed to Emory University Hospital with a ruptured appendix that had rapidly progressed to severe sepsis. I was in the ICU for 2 weeks, dipping in and out of consciousness, hovering on the absolute brink. Before they put me under for the emergency surgery, the hospital administration had urged me to assign a proxy. Terrified and in agonizing pain, I had signed a broad, durable power of attorney granting my mother the right to make medical and emergency financial decisions if I became incapacitated. When I recovered, I whispered, tracing the blue notary stamp with a numb finger. I told my attorney to revoke it. I signed the revocation papers myself. You did? Evelyn confirmed, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and heartbreak. But your mother is a cunning, predatory woman. Before the revocation was officially filed with the state, she took the original document and made certified, notarized copies. She kept them in her back pocket like a loaded gun. She leaned forward, tapping the loan document. 6 months ago, when Arthur's crypto scam went belly up and he owed a fortune to some very bad people, Beatrice walked into a branch of First National, not our primary bank, a secondary lender. She presented the notarized 2023 power of attorney, claimed you were suffering from early onset cognitive decline and were unable to leave the house. She used the lake house as collateral, pulled out $400,000 and wired it directly to Arthur's offshore shell company. And the silence in the office was deafening. The sheer calculated malice of it all was almost too massive to process. She hadn't just stolen money from a checking account. She had weaponized my mortality. She had taken the darkest, most terrifying moment of my life, a moment when I was lying on a ventilator, trusting her to protect me, and she had used it to rob me blind. She mortgaged my retirement, I said, my voice barely a thread. She put a lien on my house to pay for his gambling debts. And Arthur blew through it, Evelyn said ruthlessly, not letting me look away from the facts. He lost the $400,000. That's why he was so desperate at the party. That's why he tried to charge the casino marker to your platinum card. The first massive mortgage payment on this HELOC is due next Friday. If it defaults, the bank will initiate foreclosure proceedings. They will take the lake house, Eleanor. I closed the folder. The edges of the manila paper felt sharp against my fingertips. For 40 years, I had analyzed every market fluctuation, mitigated every risk, and built airtight contracts to protect my clients. But the greatest liability, the most catastrophic vulnerability in my entire portfolio was sitting at the head of my family dining table. My mother didn't love me. She loved my utility. And when I finally said no, she had decided I was entirely expendable. It's wire fraud, Evelyn stated, her voice returning to its sharp professional cadence. It's bank fraud. It's identity theft. It's elder financial abuse. Elle, this isn't family drama anymore. This is a federal crime. If the FBI gets a hold of this, they are looking at 5 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary. She paused, watching me carefully. I need to know what you want to do, because once I send this to the authorities, there is no putting the genie back in the bottle. You will be sending your 84-year-old mother and your brother to prison. I stood up from my desk. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the tiny cars crawling along Peachtree Street. I felt an incredible, overwhelming sense of calm wash over me. The storm of grief and betrayal had passed, leaving behind a cold, desolate, but perfectly clear landscape. I am a woman of steady compliance. I respect the law, and the law was about to be my greatest weapon. Evie, I said, my reflection staring back at me in the glass. The bruise on my cheek was turning a sickly yellowish purple. Call my personal attorney. Tell him I want to quietly initiate a civil suit to freeze every single asset Arthur has his name on, no matter how small. Then get me a meeting with a federal prosecutor. Evelyn let out a long, shaky breath, a grim smile finally touching her lips. And what about the credit cards? The daily limits? Leave them at $100, I instructed, turning back to face her. Let them scramble. Let them panic. Let Arthur sweat over his casino markers. They think I'm just giving them the silent treatment because I'm upset about a slap. Let them underestimate me. I walked back to the desk and placed my hand flat on the manila folder. They wanted to use my name to build their house of cards, I said, my voice absolute and unyielding. Now they get to watch me burn it down, piece by piece. The first 2 weeks of December arrived in Atlanta with a bitter, unseasonable chill. The city was dripping in holiday cheer, draped in twinkling lights and evergreen garlands, but inside the executive suite of Vance Brokerage, the atmosphere was absolute zero. I had been operating in total radio silence. For 14 days, I hadn't answered a single text, email, or phone call from my mother or my brother. I spent my days working with Evelyn, my corporate attorneys, and a quiet, razor-sharp investigator from the federal prosecutor's office. We were building an airtight, irrefutable paper trail of the HELOC mortgage fraud and the casino wire transfers. In the eyes of the law, you don't strike until you can guarantee a conviction. So, I waited. I played the long game. But out in the wild, the $100 daily limit on their secondary cards was finally starting to draw blood. It started on a Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing the blueprints for a new commercial park when my private line buzzed. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, an audio file popped into my inbox, forwarded by the automated system. I clicked play, leaning back in my leather chair. "Eleanor, it's Mother." Beatrice's voice echoed through the speakers, laced with haughty irritation. I am standing at the checkout counter at Neiman Marcus in Phipps Plaza, and the cashier, who clearly doesn't know who I am, just told me my platinum card was declined. "Declined, Eleanor. I am trying to buy the Cartier watch for Arthur's Christmas present. Call the bank and fix this immediately. It is humiliating." I didn't smile. I just dragged the audio file into a folder on my desktop labeled Evidence. 3 hours later, another voicemail. This time, the Southern Belle facade was cracking. "Eleanor, pick up the damn phone. I just tried to pay for my Botox touch-up and the card was declined again." The receptionist looked at me like I was a beggar. "Have you lost your mind? Call me back." By Wednesday, the panic had officially set in and the baton was passed to Arthur. "Hey, Elle, sis." Arthur's voice came through, trying for that slick, casual tone, but I could hear the tight, breathless anxiety underneath. "Listen, I think there's a glitch with the accounts. Mother's cards are acting up, and I tried to use the emergency reserve to cover some overhead for the tech launch, and it bounced. I'm in a real bind here, Elle. The investors are getting antsy. Just call me, okay? We can talk this out. Don't be petty about the party." Petty. He thought mortgaging my house to pay his gambling debts was just a little family spat I was being petty about. By Thursday morning, the voicemails had stopped. The silence wasn't a surrender. It was a tactical retreat. Evelyn walked into my office just before noon, bypassing the pleasantries entirely. She wasn't carrying financial folders today. She was holding her iPad like it was a live grenade. "They figured it out," Evelyn announced, her jaw set in a hard, furious line. "They realized you didn't freeze the accounts completely, but you choked the life out of them. They called the bank, and customer service told them the primary account holder, you, had implemented a hard cap. And since they can't get you on the phone to scream at you, they took it public." I finished the sentence, my stomach giving a slow, unpleasant lurch. "You need to see this," Evelyn said, walking around my desk and dropping the iPad in front of me. "Brace yourself, Elle. It's a masterclass in gaslighting." On the screen was a video from Facebook. It was a live stream that had been posted an hour ago by Beatrice Sterling. I hit play. There was my mother sitting on the plush velvet sofa of her Buckhead condo, the condo I paid the maintenance fees on. She wasn't wearing her usual impeccable makeup or her designer silk blouses. She was wearing a plain, slightly oversized cardigan, her hair pulled back loosely, looking fragile, old, and utterly heartbroken. It was a costume perfectly curated to elicit maximum pity. "Hello, friends," Beatrice began, her voice quivering perfectly on cue. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. I never thought I would have to make a video like this. Family matters should stay private. But I am an 84-year-old widow, and I am terrified. I have nowhere else to turn." "Oscar-worthy," Evelyn muttered bitterly under her breath. "Many of you were at my birthday party at the Piedmont Country Club," Beatrice continued, looking directly into the camera lens with wide, watery eyes. "You saw what happened. You saw my daughter, Eleanor, completely lose her grip on reality. She humiliated our family, and when I tried to correct her, when I tried to pull her aside and tell her she was bringing shame on us with her selfish behavior, she snapped." I stared at the screen, a cold numbness spreading through my chest. She was completely rewriting history. She slapped me. She screamed at me to leave. But in her narrative, she was the victim of an unhinged, unstable daughter. "I hit her," Beatrice said, her voice dropping to a dramatic, remorseful whisper. "I admit it, and I carry that sin in my heart. I slapped my own daughter, But you have to understand, I was protecting her brother. I was protecting our family's good name. She was shaming us. She has always been so obsessed with money, so cold, so calculating. And now she's taking her revenge. Beatrice let out a ragged sob, burying her face in the tissue for a moment before looking back up, her expression a perfect portrait of elderly despair. Eleanor has cut me off. She froze my accounts right before Christmas. She knows I have a heart condition. She knows I need my medications. She left her 84-year-old mother in the cold, all because I dared to stand up to her greed. Arthur is doing everything he can to care for me, but his tech company is just starting out, and Eleanor is trying to ruin him too. Please pray for her soul. Pray that she finds her way back to the Lord, because the daughter I raised is gone. The video ended. The screen faded to black, showing only the reflection of my own face, stoic and pale. 500,000 views, Evelyn said, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. She snatched the iPad back. 50,000 shares. It's spreading like wildfire through the country club circuit, the garden club, the local church groups. The comments... God, the comments are vile. They're calling you a monster. They're saying you should be investigated by Adult Protective Services for elder abuse. I didn't say anything. I just folded my hands on the desk, feeling the smooth, cool wood beneath my palms. It gets worse, Evelyn continued, pacing the length of my office. The optics are bleeding into the business. I just got off the phone with the Harrison Group. They're pulling out of the Midtown lease negotiations. Old man Harrison plays golf with the guys who were at the party. He saw the video. He told me, quote, I don't do business with people who kick their elderly mothers to the curb. And we're looking at a massive PR nightmare, Eleanor. It's a smear campaign, and it's working. Of course it's working, I said softly, my voice shockingly calm even to my own ears. It's what narcissists do, Evie. When they can no longer control you, they try to control how other people see you. She's projecting her own financial abuse onto me. It's a textbook Darvo tactic: deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. Evelyn stopped pacing and stared at me, exasperated. I don't care about the psychology acronyms right now, Eleanor. I care about Vance Brokerage taking a multi-million-dollar hit because your mother is crying crocodile tears on the internet. We need to fight back. We need to release a statement. Let me leak the casino charges to the press. Let me tell the Harrison Group that Arthur is a gambling addict. We have to defend you. No, I said, the word cutting through the air like a steel blade. Evelyn threw her hands up in the air. Why? Why are you letting her drag your name through the mud? I stood up, walking over to my private bar cart. I poured 2 fingers of scotch into a crystal glass and handed it to Evelyn, who looked like she desperately needed it. Then I poured one for myself. Because, Evelyn, you don't wrestle a pig in the mud, I said, looking her dead in the eye. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. Beatrice wants a public screaming match. She wants me to go on Facebook and post bank statements. She wants drama, because drama creates noise, and noise creates confusion. I took a slow sip of the scotch, feeling the burn in the back of my throat. If I retaliate publicly right now, it turns into a he said, she said family feud, I explained, the strategic, compliant part of my brain running the algorithm of our destruction. And in a public feud, society will always side with the crying 84-year-old widow over the wealthy, stoic CEO daughter. We lose that PR battle every time. So, we just do nothing? Evelyn demanded, clutching her glass. We let her ruin your reputation? My reputation is built on 30 years of ironclad contracts and unyielding integrity, I replied. It can withstand a few weeks of country club gossip. We stay the course. We do not engage with the circus. I walked back to my desk and tapped the manila folder containing the forged HELOC documents. We are not fighting a PR battle, Evie. We are preparing a federal indictment, I reminded her, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet register. Let Beatrice go on Facebook. Let her spin her lies. Let her build this massive public pedestal for herself. Because when the FBI kicks down her door in a few weeks and arrests her son for wire fraud and indicts her for identity theft, the higher she has climbed, the harder the fall is going to be. Evelyn stared at me for a long moment, the anger in her eyes slowly dissolving into a profound, almost awestruck respect. She took a slow sip of her scotch. Ice in your veins, Eleanor, she whispered. No, I corrected her, turning to look out the window at the sprawling city I had conquered. Just 40 years of practice. By the second week of December, the fallout from Beatrice's Facebook livestream had settled into a low, ugly hum across Atlanta's high society. My name was Mud at the Piedmont Country Club. A few of my more skittish clients had paused their contracts, suddenly deciding it wasn't a good look to do business with a woman who supposedly starved her elderly mother before Christmas. I didn't flinch. I spent my days in the sleek, soundproof sanctuary of my corner office, drafting commercial leases and quietly feeding documents to the federal prosecutor's investigator. I was building a guillotine, and Beatrice and Arthur were busy polishing the blade for me. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, exactly 3 weeks after the disastrous birthday party. I was at my desk reviewing a zoning permit when a sudden, sharp commotion erupted in the reception area outside my office. "Ma'am, you can't go back there. Ms. Vance is in a meeting." It was the panicked voice of my young executive assistant, Sarah. "Get out of my way, you little twit. I am her mother." The heavy oak door to my office didn't just open. It was shoved inward with such force that it hit the wall stopper with a loud crack. Beatrice Sterling marched into my office like a reigning monarch who had just found peasants trespassing in her garden. The fragile, weeping old woman from the Facebook video was entirely gone. She was dressed to the nines in a tailored Chanel tweed suit, her hair perfectly coiffed, radiating an aura of absolute, terrifying entitlement. The overpowering scent of Chanel No. 5 hit the room like a physical wave. Right behind her was Arthur. He didn't look like a tech visionary today. The custom tuxedo was gone, replaced by an expensive but severely wrinkled cashmere sweater. He looked haggard. There were dark circles under his eyes, and a fine sheen of nervous sweat coated his forehead. The casino was clearly breathing down his neck. Sarah hovered in the doorway, clutching her iPad to her chest, looking terrified. "Ms. Vance, I'm so sorry. I tried to stop them, but they just barged right past security." "It's all right, Sarah," I said, my voice perfectly level. I didn't stand up. I didn't even drop my pen. I just looked at my uninvited guests over the rims of my reading glasses. "Hold my calls, and please close the door behind you." Sarah nodded frantically and pulled the heavy oak door shut, the latch clicking with a sense of grim finality. We were alone. I casually reached out and pressed my thumb against the sleek, silver dictaphone sitting next to my keyboard. The tiny red LED light blinked to life, entirely hidden behind my ornate pen holder. Georgia is a one-party consent state when it comes to recording conversations. As long as I was part of the conversation, I didn't need their permission to record every single word. "Well," I said, leaning back in my leather chair and folding my hands. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Did the bank's customer service line finally hang up on you?" Beatrice slammed her designer handbag onto my polished mahogany desk. "Drop the Ice Queen act, Eleanor. It's over. You've had your little tantrum, and now it is time to act like an adult and fix this." "Fix what exactly?" I asked mildly. "You know damn well what," Arthur snapped, stepping out from behind our mother. His hands were shaking slightly. He shoved them deep into his pockets to hide it. "The cards, Elle. You put $100 limit on the accounts. It's a joke. I can't even take a client out to lunch. You're strangling my business." "You don't have a business, Arthur," I corrected him calmly. "You have a gambling addiction and a very angry VIP host at the Bellagio. How is the weather in Nevada this time of year?" Arthur's face drained of color. He shot a panicked look at Beatrice. He hadn't expected me to know about the casino. He thought I had just cut them off because of the slap. Beatrice didn't miss a beat. She stepped right into his line of fire, shielding her golden boy. "How dare you spy on your brother? So what if he had a minor setback at the tables? He is under a tremendous amount of stress, Eleanor. Stress that you cause him by being so unsupportive." It was breathtaking. The absolute Olympic-level mental gymnastics required to blame me for his gambling debt. "So let me get this straight," I said, keeping my tone inquisitive, almost academic. "You barged into my place of business to demand that I lift the limit on my credit cards so Arthur can pay off a $150,000 casino marker? Is that the pitch?" "No," Arthur interjected, his voice taking on a dark, desperate edge. He leaned over my desk, planting his knuckles on the wood. "I want the limits lifted, yeah. But we also need you to sign over the deed to the Lake Lanier property." Inside, my heart gave a slow, heavy thud. But on the outside, I just tilted my head, perfectly composed. "The lake house? Why on earth would I do that?" "Don't play dumb, Eleanor. It doesn't suit you," Beatrice sneered, pacing the length of my office. "Arthur needs capital to keep his investors at bay. We already pulled a line of credit on the lake house to help him out. But the bank is starting to ask questions about the primary account holder. They want you to sign a transfer of deed to a trust managed by Arthur so he can properly service the loan. It's just paperwork. There it was, the confession. Spoken clearly, cleanly, right into the microphone of my dictaphone. You pulled a $400,000 line of credit on a house you do not own, I said, repeating the facts slowly for the recording. Using a revoked medical power of attorney that you kept hidden, you committed mortgage fraud, Mother. It is not fraud when it is family, Beatrice shrieked, her Southern Belle mask slipping to reveal the raw, ugly entitlement underneath. Your father left us with nothing. I raised you. I put a roof over your head. Everything you have is because of me. That house is as much mine as it is yours. And I decided your brother needed the equity more than you needed a weekend cabin. And I looked at Arthur. And you went along with this? You let her forge my signature? She didn't forge anything. She's your proxy, Arthur deflected, his voice rising in panic. Listen to me, Elle. We are way past playing nice. You saw the video Mom posted. Half the city thinks you're a monster. I saw it, I said coolly. A very compelling piece of fiction. It's not fiction if people believe it, Arthur threatened, a nasty sneer curling his lips. And we can make it worse. A lot worse. You're a commercial real estate broker. Your entire empire is built on your pristine reputation. What happens if Mom goes to the local news? What happens if she gives an exclusive interview to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about how you mentally abused her for decades? We will scorch the earth, Eleanor. We will tank this company. He stood up straight, trying to look imposing, but he just looked like a rat backed into a corner. Here's the deal, Arthur said, laying out the extortion with terrifying casualness. You sign over the deed to the lake house so I can handle the HELOC. You lift the limits on the platinum card so I can clear my immediate overhead. You do that, and Mom takes down the video. We tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. We go back to playing happy family for the holidays. A clean break. A shakedown, I noted, my voice dropping to a whisper. You are standing in my office shaking me down. It's the cost of doing business, sis, Arthur shot back. You've always been good at math. Do the math. Lose a lake house or lose your entire company. Read the room, Elle. You don't have the leverage here. I stared at the two of them. My own mother, standing there with her arms crossed, looking at me with pure, unadulterated disdain. My brother, sweating and desperate, trying to extort me to save his own skin. For 40 years, I had bent over backwards for these people. I had bought their cars, paid their mortgages, funded their lifestyles, all in the desperate hope that one day they would look at me and say, "Thank you. We love you." It was a fool's errand. They didn't see a daughter or a sister. They saw an ATM. And now that the ATM was broken, they were trying to smash the screen with a baseball bat. I took a deep breath, letting the final, lingering shred of familial obligation die a quiet death in my chest. I reached out and clicked the red button on my dictaphone. The light turned off. The file was saved. I finally stood up. I'm not a tall woman, but when I stood up behind that massive desk wearing a tailored suit bought with my own blood, sweat, and tears, I watched Arthur physically take a step back. Are you quite finished? I asked. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Beatrice frowned, clearly unsettled by my lack of hysterics. Eleanor, did you hear a word your brother just said? We are giving you an out. I heard every word, I replied, walking around the desk. I didn't walk toward them. I walked to the door. I grabbed the brass handle and pulled the heavy oak door wide open. And my answer is no. Arthur's jaw dropped. Are you insane? I just told you we will destroy your reputation. You can certainly try, Arthur, I said, my voice carrying out into the reception area, ensuring every one of my employees could hear my utter calm. But I will not sign over the deed to my property. I will not lift the credit limits. And I will not be extorted by two people who have spent the last 3 years stealing from me. You selfish, arrogant bitch, Beatrice screamed, completely losing what was left of her composure. She grabbed a heavy crystal paperweight off the edge of my desk and hurled it at the wall. It shattered against the drywall with a deafening crash, leaving a massive dent and showering the carpet with glass. Several gasps echoed from the bullpen outside. Sarah, I called out sharply, not taking my eyes off my mother. Call building security. Tell them we have 2 hostile trespassers who need to be escorted off the premises immediately. You can't do this, Arthur yelled, panic finally breaking through his arrogant facade. Elle, if I don't pay that marker, those guys are going to break my legs. You're signing my death warrant. Then I suggest you buy some crutches, I replied. I pointed to the open door. Get out of my office. Get out of my building. And if either of you ever contacts me again, my lawyers will file a restraining order so fast it will make your head spin. Beatrice was hyperventilating, her chest heaving, her eyes wild with a mixture of fury and genuine shock. She had pushed all the buttons. She had run her usual playbook of guilt, shame, and public humiliation. And for the first time in my 62 years of life, it hadn't worked. The invisible pillar she had leaned on for decades had simply stepped aside, and she was in free fall. 2 burly security guards in dark suits appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Vance, is everything all right here?" the lead guard asked, assessing the shattered crystal on the floor. "These 2 individuals were just leaving," I said, gesturing to my family. "Please ensure they make it to the parking garage and permanently revoke their building access." Arthur grabbed Beatrice by the arm. He knew it was over. The extortion had failed. "Come on, Mom, let's go. She's lost her mind. She's dead to us." And Beatrice let him pull her toward the door, but she stopped on the threshold. She looked back at me, her face twisted in a mask of pure hatred. "You will die alone, Eleanor," she spat, her voice trembling. "Sitting on your pile of money, completely alone." "Better alone," I replied softly, "than in a cage." She didn't understand what I meant, but she would, soon enough. They were escorted out, their angry voices echoing down the hallway until the elevator doors finally swallowed them whole. I stood in my office, looking at the dent in the wall and the shattered crystal on the floor. Evelyn slipped into the room, sidestepping the glass. She looked at the dictaphone on my desk, then up at me. "Did you get it?" Evelyn asked, her voice hushed. I picked up the silver device, feeling the cold metal against my palm. I had a recorded confession of mortgage fraud, wire fraud, and a textbook attempt at extortion. It was the silver bullet. "I got it all," I said, handing the dictaphone to her. "Send it to the federal prosecutor. Tell them we're ready to press charges." The week between Christmas and New Year's Eve is usually a dead zone in the corporate world. The phones stop ringing, the emails slow to a trickle, and Atlanta settles into a quiet, frosty hibernation. But inside my penthouse, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, pressurized quiet that comes right before the storm breaks. I spent Christmas Day entirely alone, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't hate it. There was no dry turkey, no passive-aggressive comments about my wardrobe, and no Arthur cornering me by the eggnog to pitch a pyramid scheme. I drank a $200 bottle of Cabernet, watched the snow flurry over the city, and felt a profound sense of relief. The audio recording of the extortion attempt in my office had been the smoking gun the federal prosecutor needed. The wheels of justice grind slowly, but once they catch traction, they are an absolute juggernaut. Subpoenas were being drafted, bank records were being seized. It was only a matter of time now. But Evelyn, bless her relentless, paranoid heart, wasn't satisfied. "If we're going to drop the hammer, we need to make sure there are no loose nails," she had told me the day after the office confrontation. She had hired a private forensic archivist to comb through every public record, tax return, and legal filing with Beatrice's name on it dating back 40 years. She wanted to ensure my mother hadn't attached my name to any other hidden liabilities. On the morning of December 29th, Evelyn arrived at my penthouse. She didn't have her usual brisk, confident stride. She walked in slowly, holding a single, slim manila folder. She looked exhausted, her eyes shadowed with something I had never seen in her before, deep, profound sorrow. "Evie?" I asked, setting down my coffee cup. "What is it? Did Arthur flee the state?" "No," Evelyn said softly. She didn't walk to the kitchen island. She walked straight over to the velvet sofa in the living room and sat down heavily, staring at the folder in her lap. "Arthur is still in Buckhead, dodging phone calls from the casino. The feds have him under surveillance. This isn't about him, Eleanor. This is about you." A cold prickle of apprehension washed over the back of my neck. I walked over and sat down beside her. "What did you find?" Evelyn opened the folder. Inside was a stack of yellowed, fragile paper protected by clear, archival sleeves. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a legal document typed on an old-fashioned typewriter, the ink slightly faded but still perfectly legible. "When we started digging into Beatrice's past, the archivist had to pull the probate records from when your father died," Evelyn explained, her voice remarkably gentle. "My father, Richard Vance. He had died of a sudden, massive heart attack in the winter of 1985. I was 22 years old, barely out of college, working 2 minimum wage jobs to keep a roof over my head. Arthur had just turned 18. My mother had wailed at the funeral, claiming my father had left us completely destitute. She said his business had failed, his accounts were empty, and she was a penniless widow. That was the defining moment of my life. The moment I realized no one was coming to save me. I had to pull myself up by my bootstraps, swallow my grief, and build an empire with my bare hands just to survive. I remember, I said softly, staring at the yellowed paper. He left us nothing. Mom had to sell his watch just to pay for the casket. Evelyn closed her eyes for a second, taking a shaky breath. Oh, Elle, that was a lie. She slid the archival sleeve toward me. This is the original certified copy of your father's last will and testament, Evelyn said, tapping the glass-clear plastic. Filed and sealed in 1985. The archivist found it buried in a mislabeled box in the county basement. Eleanor, your father didn't die broke. He had a comprehensive corporate life insurance policy, $250,000. I stared at her, uncomprehending. $250,000 in 1985? That was a staggering amount of money back then. It was absolute wealth. Yes, Evelyn said grimly, and read Clause 4. I looked down at the faded typewriter ink. My eyes scanned the legal jargon until I found my own name. The sum of $200,000 to be placed into an irrevocable trust for the sole benefit of my daughter, Eleanor Rosevance, to be dispersed upon her 23rd birthday, intended for the establishment of her business endeavors or the purchase of a primary residence. The remainder to my wife, Beatrice. The breath left my lungs in a sudden, painful rush. The room seemed to tilt slightly on its axis. He left it to me, I whispered, my fingers tracing the outline of the letters through the plastic sleeve. He knew I wanted to start a brokerage. He believed in me. He loved you, Evelyn corrected fiercely. He wanted to give you the world. But I never saw a dime, I stammered, my fiercely logical brain trying to make sense of a mathematical impossibility. If the will was filed, if the trust was mandated, how did I not know? How did I not get the money? Evelyn flipped to the next page in the sleeve. It was a notarized waiver. Because you were 22, grieving and completely trusting of your mother, Evelyn said, the disgust practically dripping from her words. Beatrice was the executor of the estate. The insurance company issued the check to her. Before your 23rd birthday, she filed a beneficiary waiver and dissolution of trust with the probate court. It states that you voluntarily surrendered your rights to the trust, transferring the entirety of the funds to your mother for family maintenance. I stared at the signature at the bottom of the waiver. It was my name, but the handwriting was loops and elegant cursive. It was a perfect practiced replica of my signature, crafted by a woman who had spent decades perfecting the art of deceit. She forged it, I said, my voice dead and hollow. She forged it, bribed a notary who lost his license 5 years later, and cashed the check, Evelyn confirmed. $200,000, Eleanor, wiped out. Memories hit me with the force of a freight train. 1986. I was 23. I was living in a roach-infested studio apartment in downtown Atlanta. I was working nights as a waitress and days as a receptionist at a real estate firm, eating saltines and peanut butter for dinner just so I could save enough money to take my licensing exam. I remembered crying myself to sleep from sheer exhaustion, my feet bleeding from cheap shoes, terrified I was going to end up homeless. And all the while, my mother was sitting on $250,000 that rightfully belonged to me. What did she do with it? I asked. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded like a stranger's, cold, metallic, and infinitely dangerous. Evelyn hesitated, looking away for a brief second before forcing herself to meet my gaze. She bought Arthur a brand new Porsche 911 for his high school graduation. She funded his 2-year backpacking trip across Europe, and she paid off a massive settlement to keep him out of jail after he trashed a hotel room in Miami. By 1989, the money was completely gone. That's when she started coming to you for handouts. The silence in the penthouse was absolute. I could hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. She hadn't just stolen money. She had stolen my youth. She had stolen my peace of mind. She had watched me starve, watched me work my fingers to the bone, watched me drown in student debt and sheer, paralyzing anxiety, while she used my father's dying gift to fund her golden child's reckless hedonism. And then, the ultimate, sickening irony. After she had drained my inheritance dry, she had spent the next 30 years making me feel guilty for not giving her more. Elle? Evelyn asked softly, reaching out to touch my arm. Say something. I didn't cry. I think I was so far past the threshold of human grief that the emotion had just crystallized into pure, unadulterated ice. Every time I had written her a check, Every time I had paid for a luxury vacation. Every time I had stood silently while she belittled me in public, telling the world I was a cold, ungrateful daughter. She knew. Every single time she looked at me, she knew exactly what she had done in the dark. I slowly closed the manila folder. I smoothed my hand over the cover, pressing it flat. When Arthur came to my office last week to extort me, I began, my voice steady, methodical, and devoid of any warmth. He said I was losing my leverage. He said I was going to die alone on a pile of money. I stood up, walking over to the window. The Atlanta skyline was gray and biting, perfectly mirroring the wasteland inside my chest. I used to feel sorry for her, I admitted quietly to the glass, even after she slapped me. Even after she mortgaged my lake house. A sick, pathetic part of me still thought, she's an old woman. She's just scared of being poor. I'll let the justice system handle the fraud, but I won't crush her. I turned around to face Evelyn. That part of me is dead now. Evelyn nodded slowly, understanding the sheer gravity of the shift. This was no longer just about protecting my assets. This was a blood debt, 40 years in the making. What do you want me to do? Evelyn asked. The FBI will arrest them for the mortgage fraud and the extortion, I said, walking back to the desk and picking up my phone. But federal investigations are quiet. They take place behind closed doors until the arraignment. Beatrice thrives on public optics. She built her entire kingdom on the lie that she is a devoted, victimized mother. I looked at Evelyn, a slow, predatory calculation forming in my mind. Arthur is hosting a New Year's Eve gala on Friday night, I stated. A desperate final attempt to pitch his fake tech company to the local angel investors before his casino markers come entirely due. I heard, Evelyn said, her eyes narrowing. He's renting out the ballroom at the St. Regis. He's using the very last pennies from his offshore shell company to fund it. It's his swan song. It's a trap, I corrected her, and he's about to catch the wrong predator. I tapped the manila folder on the coffee table. Make 50 copies of this will, Evie, I instructed. Make 50 copies of the forged HELOC documents. Make 50 copies of his casino debt ledger. Put them in very nice, expensive presentation folders. Evelyn's eyes widened, a fierce, vindictive thrill lighting up her face. You're going to the party. I am going to the party, I confirmed, feeling a terrifying, absolute calm settle over my soul. Beatrice wanted a public spectacle at the country club. She used a microphone to try and break me. It's only fitting that I return the favor. I am going to tear down her entire world, brick by brick, in front of the exact same people she lied to. I picked up my coffee cup, taking a slow sip. It was stone cold. Tell the federal prosecutor, I added softly, that if he wants to arrest Arthur Sterling, he should send his agents to the St. Regis on New Year's Eve. Tell them to wear a black tie. We're going to put on a show. December 31st, 2025. New Year's Eve in Atlanta was a sprawling, glittering affair, but the air outside my Buckhead penthouse was biting and sharp. It matched my mood perfectly. For 40 years, I had dressed for family events like a soldier putting on a flak jacket, anticipating the inevitable incoming fire. I used to wear muted colors, trying to blend into the wallpaper, hoping my mother wouldn't find a reason to pick apart my appearance, my weight, or my unmarried status. Tonight, I was dressing for an execution. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in my dressing room. I didn't choose the severe black that Beatrice had mocked at her birthday party. I chose armor. It was a custom-tailored, floor-length metallic silver gown with long sleeves and a high neckline. It was elegant, unyielding, and completely bulletproof. I paired it with diamond stud earrings, bought with my own money, and pulled my hair back into a sleek, immaculate French twist. The faint yellow shadow of the bruise on my cheek was finally gone, but the memory of the slap was etched into my bones. At 8 p.m. sharp, Evelyn let herself into the penthouse. She was wearing a sharp, midnight blue tuxedo and carrying 2 heavy, matte black canvas tote bags. The care packages are assembled, Evelyn announced, dropping the bags onto the Persian rug in the foyer with a heavy, satisfying thud. I walked out of the dressing room, the silver silk of my gown rustling quietly. Let me see them. Evelyn reached into the tote and pulled out a single, high-gloss presentation folder. It was thick, heavy stock paper, entirely black, with the Vance Brokerage logo embossed in subtle silver foil on the front. To the untrained eye, it looked exactly like a high-end commercial real estate prospectus, a Trojan horse wrapped in corporate luxury. I opened the cover. Inside, meticulously organized with vellum divider tabs, was the complete financial autopsy of Arthur and Beatrice Sterling. Tab 1, the 1985 Last Will and Testament of Richard Vance, alongside the forged beneficiary waiver that proved Beatrice had stolen my $200,000 inheritance. Tab 2, the Lake Lanier HELOC loan documents bearing my mother's fraudulent signature, proving mortgage and wire fraud. Tab 3, the Bellagio casino markers and offshore shell company routing numbers proving Arthur was a degenerate gambler laundering stolen money. Tab 4, a cleanly typed transcript of the extortion attempt in my office, complete with the QR code that linked directly to the unedited audio file. "It's a masterpiece," I murmured, running my hand over the glossy paper. "You outdid yourself, Evie." "I had my paralegals working overtime," Evelyn said, a fierce, predatory gleam in her eyes. "We printed 50 of them. Enough for every single angel investor, venture capitalist, and old money socialite Arthur managed to drag to the circus tonight." She checked her Rolex. "I also got a text from Agent Miller at the U.S. Attorney's Office. He and 2 other undercover federal agents are already on site at the St. Regis. They are wearing black tie. They are blending in at the bar, nursing ginger ales, waiting for your signal." "And the casino?" I asked, looking up. Arthur owed $150,000 to some very dangerous people, and the 30-day marker had expired. "My private investigator says 2 guys from Vegas checked into a motel by the airport yesterday," Evelyn replied grimly. "They're not on the guest list, but if Arthur doesn't wire them the money by midnight, they won't be asking for an invitation." "He's a dead man walking, Eleanor. He is completely out of time." "Good," I said, slipping my phone into a small silver clutch. "Let's go watch the clock strike 12. The drive to the St. Regis in Buckhead took less than 15 minutes. The streets were crawling with limousines and luxury SUVs, the city vibrating with the manic, champagne-fueled energy of New Year's Eve. When my driver pulled the Mercedes Maybach up to the grand entrance of the St. Regis, the valet immediately rushed over to open my door. I stepped out into the crisp night air, the towering crystal chandeliers of the hotel lobby casting a warm golden glow across the imported marble driveway. Evelyn walked beside me, flanked by the 2 heavy tote bags she had entrusted to a bellhop whom she had tipped $100 to follow us silently. The Astor Ballroom was located on the upper level. As we approached the grand double doors, the muffled thumping bass of a live jazz fusion band vibrated through the floorboards. Arthur had pulled out all the stops. He was burning the very last drops of the money he had stolen from my lake house just to keep up this charade. It was smoke and mirrors, a desperate attempt to put lipstick on a pig and sell it as a unicorn. 2 hostesses with iPads stood at the entrance. "Name, please?" one of them asked, giving my silver gown an admiring look. "Eleanor Vance," I said smoothly, "and Evelyn Hayes. We are VIP investors." The hostess scrolled through her iPad. She frowned slightly. "I'm sorry, Ms. Vance, I don't see your name on the guest list." "That's because I'm the primary shareholder," I replied, my voice dripping with absolute, unwavering authority. I didn't wait for her to argue. I simply walked past the velvet rope, Evelyn right on my heels, leaving the hostess blinking in confusion. We stepped into the Astor Ballroom, and the sheer audacity of the opulence hit me like a physical wave. There was a towering ice sculpture of Arthur's fake tech company logo in the center of the room. Waiters in white gloves circulated with trays of beluga caviar and Dom Perignon. The room was packed with about 100 people, mostly older, wealthy Atlanta businessmen, a few gullible tech bloggers, and a smattering of my mother's country club friends who were there for the free booze. For the first 30 seconds, no one noticed me. Then, the whispers started. It began near the entrance. A woman in a red sequined dress nudged her husband, pointing her champagne flute in my direction. The husband turned, his eyes widening. He leaned over and whispered to the couple next to him. Like a ripple in a pond, the gossip spread outward. "Isn't that Eleanor Vance? The one from the Facebook video? I heard she cut off her mother's heart medication. Left the poor woman penniless. What is she doing here? Has she no shame?" I felt the heavy, judgmental weight of 100 stares bearing down on me. 2 weeks ago, this level of public scrutiny would have paralyzed me. I would have felt the crushing need to explain myself, to beg them to understand that I wasn't the villain. Tonight, I let them look. I kept my chin high, my posture impeccable, and walked straight toward the center of the room. I wasn't just walking into the lion's den. I was the one locking the cage door behind me. Across the room, standing near the VIP tables, I spotted her. Beatrice Sterling was wearing a tasteful, melancholy shade of dark plum. She was holding court with 3 wealthy widows, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, undoubtedly spinning another fabricated tale of my cruelty to milk their sympathy. Then she looked up. Our eyes met across the crowded ballroom. The transition on her face was instantaneous and absolute. The fragile, weeping victim vanished, replaced by a flash of sheer, unadulterated panic, followed immediately by venomous fury. She whispered something to the widows, excused herself abruptly, and began marching toward me, her heels clicking aggressively against the parquet floor. "Evelyn," I murmured, without taking my eyes off my mother, "start circulating. Give a folder to every single person sitting at the 3 front tables. Those are the big fish angel investors. Do not let Arthur see you doing it." "With pleasure," Evelyn whispered back, grabbing the bags from the bellhop and melting into the crowd like a shadow. Beatrice intercepted me near the ice sculpture, grabbing my upper arm with a grip that was surprisingly painful for an 84-year-old woman. She yanked me toward a quiet alcove near the emergency exits. "What in the hell are you doing here?" Beatrice hissed, her voice vibrating with barely suppressed rage. She looked around frantically to make sure none of her friends were in earshot. "Are you out of your mind? You are completely persona non grata in this town, Eleanor. You have a lot of nerve showing your face at your brother's gala." "It's a public venue, Mother," I replied, my voice a calm, placid lake. I looked down at her hand gripping my arm until she slowly, reluctantly, let go. "Besides, Arthur pitched me so aggressively at your birthday party. I decided I wanted a front row seat to see his vision." "You are here to ruin him," she spat, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. "You are just so bitter, so consumed by jealousy that Arthur is finally stepping into the spotlight, you couldn't stand staying home." I actually let out a short, genuine laugh. "Jealousy? Mother, Arthur is 58 years old, and he is hosting a party paid for by a fraudulent home equity line of credit. He isn't stepping into the spotlight. He is standing on a trapdoor." Beatrice's face went entirely pale. The heavy layer of expensive foundation couldn't hide the sudden, stark terror in her eyes. I had never spoken the words fraudulent home equity line of credit to her face. During the confrontation in my office, I had only asked questions to get them to confess on tape. Now, I was laying my cards on the table. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, the Southern Belle facade completely shattering. "You're crazy. You're losing your mind, Eleanor. I'm calling security." "Call them," I challenged her, stepping an inch closer. I loomed over her, utilizing every bit of my presence. "Call the police, Beatrice. Let's get the authorities in here right now. Let's show them the 1985 probate files. Let's talk about Richard Vance's life insurance policy." She stopped breathing. I watched the realization hit her like a physical blow to the chest. Her eyes dilated, darting wildly as her brain desperately tried to calculate how I had found out about a crime she had committed 4 decades ago. "You," she choked out, her voice barely a rattle in her throat. "I know," I said, leaning in so close I could smell the stale mints on her breath. "I know everything. I know you stole my future to buy him a Porsche. I know you mortgaged my sanctuary to pay a casino, and I know you tried to extort me to cover your tracks." A sudden burst of microphone feedback echoed through the ballroom, making both of us jump. We looked toward the main stage. Arthur had just stepped up to the podium, tapping the microphone. He looked like a man sweating bullets. His tuxedo was impeccable, but his smile was tight, frantic, and wild around the edges. "Testing, testing, ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please." Arthur's voice boomed through the speakers, desperately trying to project confidence. "Thank you all for coming out tonight to celebrate the dawn of a new year and the dawn of a massive new disruption in the tech space." I looked back at Beatrice. She looked like she was about to faint. "Excuse me, Mother," I said, giving her a cold, empty smile. "I believe the pitch is starting, and you are really going to want to hear this." I turned my back on her and walked toward the front of the stage, watching as Evelyn silently, methodically slid the glossy black presentation folders in front of the 10 wealthiest men in the room. The countdown to midnight had officially begun, and Arthur was about to blow his own life to pieces. Arthur tapped the microphone, the high-pitched feedback echoing across the Astor ballroom. He gripped the edges of the podium so tightly his knuckles were white. Beneath the warm, golden chandeliers of the St. Regis, he looked like a man standing in front of a firing squad, desperately trying to sell them life insurance. "As we approach midnight, we aren't just ringing in 2026, Arthur projected, his voice strained with an artificial, booming enthusiasm. "We are ringing in a paradigm shift. My new platform, Apex Solutions, is going to completely disrupt the peer-to-peer networking space. We are talking about unprecedented synergy. And tonight, I'm offering a select few of you the ground floor opportunity of a lifetime. A minimum buy-in of $100,000 secures your equity in what will undoubtedly be the next Silicon Valley unicorn. I stood near the ice sculpture, a crystal glass of sparkling water in my hand, watching the performance. It was a masterclass in desperation. He was throwing out buzzwords like confetti, hoping nobody would look too closely at the empty box he was selling. At the front of the room, seated at the 3 VIP tables, were the heavy hitters Arthur had spent weeks courting. Among them was Thomas Harrison, the patriarch of the Harrison Group, the very man who had threatened to pull his commercial lease with my firm after Beatrice's tearful Facebook livestream. I watched as Harrison, looking slightly bored by Arthur's pitch, reached out and opened the glossy black presentation folder Evelyn had placed next to his champagne flute. The heavy vellum cover folded back. I didn't need to see the pages to know exactly what he was looking at. Tab 1, the 1985 probate court records and the forged inheritance waiver. Harrison frowned, adjusting his reading glasses. At the next table, a prominent Atlanta venture capitalist opened his folder. Then another. And another. The rustle of heavy stock paper began to ripple through the VIP section. It was a subtle sound, but in the quiet, attentive ballroom, it was as deafening as a siren. Arthur noticed it. He faltered mid-sentence. With our proprietary algorithm, the ROI is guaranteed to... His voice trailed off as Thomas Harrison slowly stood up from his chair. The patriarch didn't look bored anymore. He looked absolutely livid. Arthur! Harrison's voice boomed across the room, cutting through the ambient jazz music like a machete. He held up a piece of paper from tab 3. I consider myself a fairly aggressive investor, but I have to admit this is the first time I've been asked to fund a $150,000 casino marker at the Bellagio. The entire ballroom went dead silent. You could hear the ice shifting in the cocktail glasses. Arthur froze. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. Mr. Harrison, I think there's been a mix-up with the catering staff. Those aren't my prospectuses. It's not a mix-up. Another investor at table 2 stood up, holding up the transcript from tab 4. This is a wiretap transcript of you attempting to extort your own sister, complete with a QR code to the audio file. And unless my eyes deceive me, this document in tab 2 shows you defaulted on a fraudulent $400,000 home equity loan just last week. Whispers erupted like wildfire across the room. The country club socialites who had been glaring at me 10 minutes ago were now staring at Arthur in open-mouthed horror. Arthur's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. He looked at the folders, then at the angry investors, and finally, his gaze locked onto me, standing calmly at the back of the room in my silver gown. He knew I had detonated the bomb. Security! Arthur shrieked into the microphone, his slick facade completely shattering into sheer, pathetic panic. Get her out of here! She planted those! It's a lie! It's all a lie! Actually, Arthur, it's a federal indictment, a calm, authoritative voice called out. From the shadows near the bar, 3 men in impeccable black tuxedos set down their ginger ales and walked purposefully onto the ballroom floor. The lead man, Agent Miller, reached into his jacket and pulled out a gold badge, letting it hang from a chain around his neck. Arthur Sterling, Agent Miller said, his voice easily carrying over the rising panic of the crowd. He walked straight up the steps of the stage. You are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, and attempted extortion. Put your hands behind your back. Chaos erupted. Several guests gasped. A few of the tech bloggers immediately pulled out their phones to start recording. Arthur scrambled backward, knocking over the microphone stand with a loud crash. No, wait, you don't understand. The tech company is real. The money is just tied up. The 2 other agents flanked him, grabbing his arms and spinning him around. The sharp, metallic click of handcuffs echoing through the microphone feed was the most beautiful sound I had heard in 40 years. I have the right to an attorney, Arthur squealed, his voice cracking as they locked his wrists. This is a setup. My sister is trying to ruin me. And then, just as I had predicted, the rat realized the ship was completely underwater. When faced with the terrifying reality of a federal penitentiary, the golden child's loyalty to his enabler evaporated in a millisecond. Arthur looked out into the crowd, his eyes wildly searching until he found Beatrice. She was standing near the ice sculpture, clutching her chest, her face a mask of absolute, unadulterated terror. It wasn't me! Arthur screamed, throwing his mother under the bus with breathtaking speed. He thrashed against the agent's grip. "Tell them, Mom! Tell them it was your idea! She forged the power of attorney. She's the one who signed for the lake house. She stole the life insurance money in 1985 and gave it to me. I didn't forge anything. I'm just the proxy. She's the mastermind." The collective gasp from the country club widows was loud enough to suck the oxygen out of the room. Beatrice staggered backward as if she had been physically struck. The son she had worshipped, the boy she had ruined my life to protect, had just sold her out to the FBI to save his own skin. "Arthur? How could you?" Beatrice whispered, her voice trembling, genuine tears of shock finally spilling over her heavily powdered cheeks. She looked around at her wealthy friends, desperately seeking an ally, but the women who had been comforting her 10 minutes ago were now backing away from her like she was radioactive. Agent Miller looked down at Beatrice from the stage. "Beatrice Sterling, we have a warrant for your arrest as well, ma'am, for identity theft, mortgage fraud, and conspiracy. Officers are waiting for you in the lobby." Beatrice's knees buckled. She didn't faint, but she slumped into a nearby dining chair, her chest heaving. She looked like a deflated balloon. The grand, narcissistic queen of Atlanta society had been entirely stripped of her armor. I slowly walked through the parted crowd, my silver dress gliding over the floor until I was standing directly in front of her. She looked up at me. For the first time in my life, there was no arrogance in her eyes. There was no condescension. There was only raw, pathetic desperation. "Eleanor," she choked out, reaching a trembling hand toward my arm. "Eleanor, please, you have to stop this. You know my heart can't take the stress of a trial. I'll die in prison. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. I'm your mother. You have to protect me." I looked down at the woman who had stolen my father's dying gift. The woman who had watched me starve in my 20s while she bought her son a Porsche. The woman who had slapped my face in public and then gone on the internet to call me a monster. "You said I was a shame to this family," I said, my voice quiet but carrying the absolute crushing weight of finality. "But the truth is, Mother, I was the only thing keeping it out of a federal penitentiary." She let out a ragged sob, burying her face in her hands. "I did it for family. I just wanted us to look successful." "No," I corrected her coldly. "You did it for yourself. You loved the aesthetic of wealth, but you hated the work it took to build it. You bled me dry for 40 years, and when I finally closed the vault, you tried to burn my house down." I leaned in, so only she could hear my final words to her. "I told you," I whispered. "It is better to be alone on a pile of money than in a cage. Happy New Year, Mother." I straightened up, turning my back on her for the absolute last time. I walked toward the exit of the Astor Ballroom. Evelyn was waiting for me by the double doors, a fierce, triumphant smile on her face. Behind me, the FBI agents were frog-marching Arthur down the center aisle, his frantic pleas echoing off the crystal chandeliers. 2 local police officers were walking into the room with a wheelchair for Beatrice. "Right on time," Evelyn said, checking her watch. From the streets of Buckhead below, the muffled boom of fireworks began to echo through the glass windows. It was midnight. "Come on, Evie," I said, pushing open the heavy doors and stepping out into the quiet, carpeted hallway of the hotel. "Let's go get a drink. I think I finally have something to celebrate." The air in Central Park was a sharp, biting cold that stung the cheeks and turned every breath into a plume of white smoke. But as I walked along the winding, snow-dusted paths of the Ramble, wrapped in a heavy camel hair coat and holding a steaming cup of dark roast coffee, I had never felt warmer. It had been 6 weeks since the New Year's Eve gala. 6 weeks since the FBI walked into the Astor Ballroom and surgically dismantled the Sterling family's house of cards. The fallout had been spectacular, immediate, and utterly merciless. When you spend 40 years being suffocated by someone else's manufactured emergencies, the sudden absence of chaos feels almost deafening. For the first few days of January, I kept waking up at 4 a.m., my heart racing, instinctively waiting for a phone call demanding money or a tearful, guilt-tripping voicemail. But the phone never rang. The silence was absolute, and slowly, beautifully, that silence turned into peace. My cell phone buzzed in my coat pocket, playing a cheerful jazz ringtone. I pulled it out. It was Evelyn. "Greetings from the frozen tundra of Manhattan," I answered, smiling as I sat down on a wrought iron bench overlooking the half-frozen lake. "I hope you're eating a stale pretzel and overpaying for a carriage ride." Evelyn's crisp, energetic voice came through the speaker. "I just walked out of the federal courthouse downtown. I have the final disposition on the Sterling indictments. You sitting down, Elle?" I am, I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee. Tell me. The Arthur caved, Evelyn announced, the vindictive triumph unmistakable in her tone. He took the plea deal this morning. The prosecutors had him dead to rights on the wire fraud, and the casino markers were the final nail in the coffin. He didn't want to risk taking it to trial and facing 15 years. So what did he get? 60 months, Evelyn said. 5 solid years in federal prison. He's being transferred to FCI Jessup next week. It's a medium security facility in South Georgia. No country clubs, no VIP hosts, no seed funding. The warden has him assigned to the laundry detail. Your tech visionary brother is going to be washing inmate jumpsuits for 12 cents an hour until 2031. I looked out at the ice forming on the lake, feeling a profound, quiet weight lift off my chest. Arthur had spent his entire life looking for a shortcut to the top, perfectly willing to step on my neck to get there. Now he was finally going to have to do the work. And Mother? I asked, my voice steady. Evelyn let out a sharp sigh. Beatrice played her greatest hit to the bitter end. She showed up to the arraignment in a wheelchair, wearing an oxygen cannula, weeping to the judge about her failing heart and how her wicked son manipulated her. She threw Arthur entirely to the wolves, pled no contest to the identity theft and the mortgage fraud. Did she get prison time? No, Evelyn admitted, though she didn't sound defeated. The judge took pity on an 84-year-old widow. He gave her 5 years of supervised probation. But the civil asset forfeiture didn't care about her tears. I smiled faintly against the rim of my coffee cup. Because the mortgage on your lake house was obtained through federal wire fraud, the government seized her assets to pay restitution to the bank, Evelyn explained, clearly relishing the details. They liquidated the Buckhead condo. They auctioned off her Chanel suits, her jewelry, everything. She has absolutely nothing left. She couldn't afford a private care facility, so the state placed her. Where? I asked. Shady Pines Assisted Living out in DeKalb County, Evelyn said. It's a Medicare-funded bare-bones facility. Linoleum floors, shared rooms, Salisbury steak on Tuesdays. She's surrounded by people who don't know who she is, don't care about her garden club pedigree, and certainly don't care about her optics. For a narcissist like Beatrice, that is a fate much, much worse than prison. She is entirely ordinary, and she is completely ignored. I closed my eyes, letting the cold New York wind brush against my face. The bruise on my cheek from Thanksgiving had faded weeks ago, leaving no physical trace. But the emotional phantom of that slap had lingered, until right this very second. It's over, I whispered, the reality finally truly sinking in. It's over, Evelyn agreed softly. The deed to the Lake Lanier house is fully restored in your name. The title is clear. Your inheritance from 1985 is gone forever. But honestly, considering it bought you the absolute destruction of their toxic empire, I'd say it was the best $200,000 you never spent. I laughed, a genuine, hearty sound that startled a nearby pigeon. You might be right, Evie. Oh, and one more thing, Evelyn added, her voice returning to its usual brisk, business-like cadence. Your office is currently overflowing with edible arrangements and apologies. Thomas Harrison called me 3 times this week. After the FBI raid hit the news and everyone realized you were the victim of a massive extortion plot, the country club circuit did a collective backpedal. Harrison wants to double his investment in the Midtown Commercial Park. The socialites who shunned you are suddenly claiming they always knew Beatrice was unhinged. Typical, I mused. Send the fruit baskets to the local women's shelter. And tell Thomas Harrison that my commission rate for the Midtown project just went up by 2%. If he wants to do business with me now, he pays the premium. God, I love you, Evelyn chuckled. Enjoy New York, Eleanor. You've earned every second of it. Take the rest of February off. Vance Brokerage is holding down the fort. Thanks, Evie, for everything. I'll see you in March. I hung up the phone and slipped it back into my coat pocket. I sat on the bench for a long time, watching the city move around me. Families walking their dogs, couples holding hands, tourists taking photos of the skyline. For so many years, I had believed that family was an unbreakable contract. I had believed that if you shared blood with someone, you were obligated to set yourself on fire just to keep them warm. I had let my mother and brother treat me like a bank vault because I was terrified of being the bad guy. I was terrified of the exact smear campaign that Beatrice had ultimately unleashed on me. But what I hadn't realized was that by avoiding the fire, I was slowly dying from the smoke inhalation. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for a toxic family member is to let them face the absolute crushing weight of their own consequences. I didn't ruin Arthur and Beatrice. I just stopped paying for the privilege of letting them ruin me. I simply handed them the bill. I stood up from the bench, brushing a stray snowflake off my cashmere sleeve. I felt incredibly light. At 62 years old, my life wasn't winding down. It was just beginning. I had a multi-million-dollar real estate firm that was completely mine. I had a gorgeous lake house in Georgia where I could sit on the porch and read without a single anxiety-inducing phone call. I had a best friend who would walk through fire for me. And most importantly, I had my dignity back. My mother had told me I would die alone on a pile of money. She meant it as a curse. But as I walked out of Central Park and onto the bustling, vibrant pavement of Fifth Avenue, headed toward a ridiculously expensive Italian restaurant where I was going to treat myself to a massive plate of truffle pasta, I realized something. Being alone isn't a punishment when the alternative is being held hostage. So here we are at the end. If you are listening to this and you are exhausted, if you are the one always writing the checks, always swallowing your pride, always playing the peacekeeper for a family that treats you like a resource instead of a human being, listen to me carefully. You cannot buy love. You cannot fund your way out of manipulation. And you are not required to finance your own abuse just because the people hurting you happen to share your DNA. The hardest thing I ever did was close the bank of Eleanor. It cost me my reputation for a few weeks, and it cost me the illusion of a mother who loved me. But what I bought in return was priceless. I bought my freedom. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever had to cut the cord on a toxic family member, drop a heart in the comments below. Let's remind each other that we aren't alone, and that sometimes the greatest act of self-love is simply walking away. Stay strong, build your empire, and never, ever let anyone make you feel bad for protecting your peace. Until next time.